Good morning, everyone. Dr. Mom Live series on moving forward, Women of the Bible, specifically on principle number 1, building a strong foundation. It could also be professional development or self-development. For me, it's learning about, the Bible, first of all. I find it very fascinating. Let's just say you aren't a Christian, which I am, but if maybe you aren't, it's a great book to learn about. So you're learning about, specifically, I'm doing it on Women of the Bible, 52 stories. It seems to be following Genesis, the beginning of the Bible, on through to the end. So this is number 5. We've studied Eve, Sarah, Eve, Sarah, Hagar, Sarah's handmaiden. Yesterday was Lot's wife. We don't even know her name for sure. She's just listed in the Bible as Lot's wife. And a very good lesson for all of us. And then today is Rebekah. So what I'm seeing, this is a progression of Genesis, starting in Genesis, following through these women that were very influential, and also following the bloodline that leads to Christ. I find it very fascinating. I like it. I've always thought that was fascinating when I read through Genesis, and then when they go through, there's a certain, I believe, I don't remember which book it is, but they go through the actual bloodline and how God purposely kept it sacred. So he kept it a sacred bloodline through this process of leading to Christ being born. So this is another example of how he had, how do I want to say it? I guess it was divinely inspired. I thought it's very interesting. Basically, so at this time, Abraham and Sarah are in their elderly age because Isaac now is within marrying age. So I don't know, it doesn't say how old he is, but so just think about it. So Sarah was 90 when she got pregnant. Let's just say he's 20. That puts her 110, and Abraham as well. So I'm not sure how long. I thought a lot of them lived to be 300 years old. Now I know after Sarah passes away, Abraham does take a second wife. And they go on to have several kids. So I'm not sure how old, but it'll say it in here somewhere how old Abraham was. But long story short, this story takes us through how Abraham tells his servant that he wants him to find a woman for Isaac to marry, but it cannot be a certain bloodline. It has to stay within. And back then, it's sort of within his family. And if I'm right, I think it was his brother's granddaughter, daughter, or something. So it stays within a specific bloodline. I find that very interesting. But so it's pretty cool how this story unfolds. And it also tells me that if we follow God's plan, because Rebekah and Isaac actually were very much in love, it tells me if we follow God's plan, then he will direct us in abundance, right? And how we're supposed to go, so we don't have a bad life, we have a good blessed life. So I found 2 scriptures. It wasn't specifically on Rebekah, but it was really on following God's plan for our life. If we will, the good things will happen for us. So the first one is, God will make a way when it seems there is no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. These are anonymous. I can't always find the author online. So the second one is, it may look like your situation is never going to change, but in a split second, God can completely resolve it. I've been in that situation before. Oh my goodness. Seems like we just struggle at times, don't we? But it's good for us in the end. If we'll stay true and just stay with it, it's good for us. Okay, Rebekah, her name. Now, they're in here, they're saying her name is possibly, it probably means loop or tie, L-O-O-P or tie. I have another story. Yeah, I don't know. These are completely different. Odd. In this other story I printed, it says her name, Rebekah, is another name with an animal connection. I don't know what that means. Although not belonging to any animal in particular, it has reference to animals of a limited class and in a particular condition. The name means a tie rope for animals, so it's tie, or a noose is in such a rope. Its root is found in a noun meaning a hitching place or stall, and is connected with a tie-up calf or lamb, a young animal particularly choice and fat. Applied to a female, the figure suggests her beauty by means of which men are snared and bound. That's interesting, isn't it? Thus, another meaning of Rebekah is that of captivating. If then Rebekah means a noosed cord, the loop was firmly around Isaac's neck. When Isaac took her as his bride, he forgot his grief for his dead mother and lived happily with his wife for 20 years, during which time they had no children. Okay, so what was her character? She was hardworking and generous. Her faith was so great that she left her home forever to marry a man she had never seen or met. Yet she played favorites with her sons and failed to trust God fully for the promise he had made. And this again is in Genesis 24:19 and 26. When I, Abraham's servant, came to the spring today, I said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, if you will please grant success to the journey on which I have came, see, I am standing beside the spring. If a maiden comes out to draw water, and I say to her, please let me drink a little water from your jar, and if she says to me, drink and I'll draw water for your camels too, let her be the one the Lord has chosen for my master's son, Isaac. Okay, so I'm going to back up just a minute because I want to tell you sort of what led up to that. So sorry, I'm trying to find it in the Bible where what it is basically is Abraham. Okay, so now Abraham was old, he's well advanced in his years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things by this time. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh. I don't know what that means. Maybe we can see. What does that mean? Okay, so this is what it's telling us. The servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham. Since striking one's thigh was possibly understood as a sign of remorse and submission, the placing of one's hand under the thigh of another may have indicated submission to that person's strength and authority. In any case, by undertaking this action, the servant binds himself to obey Abraham's request. Okay, so maybe it's like nowadays would be shaking hands or crossing fingers. I don't know, but so he says now Abraham and Sarah had the son Isaac, and they are and they're getting older, basically, because Isaac's probably 20 years or so. I don't know how old they were. They got married at a younger age, but Abraham is asking his servant to go to this other land and find a wife for Isaac, because he wants to make sure that he has the right bloodline, that it stays a pure bloodline. So he's saying, put your hand under my thigh, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell. So he must have been dwelling in the land of Canaan, I'm assuming. But will go to my country and to my kindred, to his relatives, and take a wife for my son. The servant said to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came? Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. So God had told him that his son was supposed to wed someone from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will not be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there. So he didn't want Isaac going back there. He's sending his servant to find Isaac a wife from his kindred. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. So then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master, I would assume to give to whoever he finds to marry his son. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at the time of the evening, the time when women go out to draw water. He said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young women to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink. And who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels? Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. So this is sort of how they knew that the person, a woman that came out, and he said these certain things to, and if she repeated back exactly what she was supposed to, then they would have known at that point that it was from God. And he says, this is the woman I want you to marry Isaac to. And so just so happens, Rebekah, who was born to Bethel, and this is the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother. So it was Bethel, the son of Milcah, the son who was born, the son of the wife of Nahor, which was so it must have been, it seems like a distance cousin to Isaac or something, which was fine back then, came out with her water on her shoulder. The young woman, who was very attractive in appearance, which they want you to know at this point, Rebekah was very attractive, a maiden whom no man had known. She was a virgin. She went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. So this was all prescripted. This is how he knew, the servant knew, because Abraham had told him, God had said, this is what you need to do. She said, and Rebekah said, drink, my lord. And she quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water. And she drew for all his camels. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. So when the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels and said, please tell me whose daughter you are. So I believe he knew at this point because she followed per script what God told him to do. He followed. She also followed, which is pretty cool that all of this is predestined and then it came to be, right? Now he's saying he wants to make sure the bloodline is correct, that the bloodline is pure. So he says, please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? She said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. She added, we have plenty of both straw and fodder and room to spend the night. The man bowed his head and worshipped the Lord. He knew at that point that Rebekah was the one that Isaac was going to marry. So he knew at this point. Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. Then the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. So at this point, they all know that it's meant to be. So, God had prepared the way and it came to pass. So Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. Laban ran out toward the man to the spring. As soon as he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms and heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, thus the man spoke to me. He went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. So he said, come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for the camels. So the man came to the house and unharnessed the camels and gave straw and fodder to the camels, and there was water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. Okay, so he said, this is the servant. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become great. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male servants and female servants, camels and donkeys. So from the time when Abraham and Sarah were told to go into this new land, they greatly prospered, and I'm only assuming it's about 20 years or so. It might be longer. I don't know. Isaac was they seemed to be wanting him to marry at this time, and I'm not sure how old he was. So we know that they've greatly prospered at this point, though. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old. And to him he has given all that he has. And to him he has given all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife from my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell. But you shall go to my father's house and to my clan and take a wife for my son. I said to my master, perhaps the woman will not follow me. But he said to me, the Lord before whom I have walked will send his angel with you and prosper your way. You shall take a wife for my son, from my clan, and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath. When you come to my clan, and if you will not give her to, and if they will not give her to you, you will be free from my oath. So he knew that if Rebekah wouldn't go with him, if the family wouldn't release her, that he would still be free. Okay, so that's kind of what led up to it. So in the Bible study we're reading, he's just repeating it. This is what happened. Drink, and I will draw water for your camels too. Let her be the one the Lord has chosen for my master's son Isaac. Before I finished praying in my heart, Rebekah came out, and with her jar on her shoulder, she went down the spring and drew water. So it all happened the way that he had been told it would if she was the right person. So then the servant told Isaac all that he had done. Isaac brought Rebekah into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Because Sarah, I was going to keep reading, it kind of tells a story, maybe on this other one we'll read it. It kind of tells a cool story of how Rebekah agrees to go with him. We know it's the right person. God has ordained Rebekah for Isaac, and this is all to keep the bloodline pure. Remember, it's leading on to King David, and then eventually Christ is born from that lineage. So it was in God's will. Rebekah goes with him, and on the ride home, they're riding into, they have in the land, I believe it's the land of Canaan now. They're riding in, and they have vast wealth and vast fields. And Isaac is out in the field working, and when the servant and Rebekah ride up, they see him, and she asks, "Who is this man that's coming?" Isaac was coming towards him. I'm sure he understood that was probably going to be his wife, right? And so she covers her face, because you're supposed to before you get married in those times. And from what I gleaned from reading through it all is Isaac was really in love with Rebekah. She was a beautiful woman. And we also learned from her coming out to draw water, and this stranger asked her if she could draw water for him, and she graciously did, and said, and he didn't even have to tell her, she said, "I'm going to also feed your camels." So she seemed very gracious as well. Okay, so he went into his tent of his mother. So Sarah was elderly at that time and passed away right after he married Rebekah. So evidently he was in love with her enough that it sort of took the grief away from what he was suffering from his mother's death. So then I put the ring. So I found this interesting. Then I put the ring in her nose. This is Isaac talking. Then I put the ring in her nose and the bracelets on her arms. Then the servant brought out gold and silver jewelry and articles of clothing and gave them to Rebekah. So evidently, the nose ring was in then, it's back. I didn't realize that, but so they evidently were into jewelry and bling back in the day, and Rebekah got articles of clothing, and she was good to go. Okay, a nose ring, often taken as a sign of rebellious youth today. The nose ring was an acceptable form of adornment in ancient times. When Abraham's servant realized Rebekah was the woman Isaac was to marry, he immediately got out the jewels he had brought along for the occasion. He gave her 2 gold bracelets and a gold nose ring. Rebekah quickly slipped the jewelry on and ran home with shining eyes to tell her family what had occurred. So in other words, she hadn't even met Isaac yet, but evidently she knew it was also from God. They presented her all this jewelry. It's like a nice wedding ring, right? So she ran home to tell her family about it. The nose ring is mentioned only 2 other times in Scripture, in Proverbs 11 and Ezekiel 16. In Ezekiel 16, God is describing in allegorical terms how much he loves the city of Jerusalem. He lovingly bathes her, then dresses her in wonderfully rich clothing and soft leather sandals. He then tenderly adorns her with jewelry. I put bracelets on your arms and a necklace around your neck, and I put a ring on your nose, earrings on your ears, and a beautiful crown on your head. You were adorned with gold and silver. That's in Ezekiel 16, 11 through 13. The Old Testament mentions jewels and jewelry numerous times. I don't remember where this is, but when God several times there's different things like temples that are erected in God's honor, and it's just immaculately adorned with jewels, and just the beauty of it all is numerous. So the Old Testament mentions jewels and jewelry numerous times. Women and men both wore earrings. They also commonly wore armlets, bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and necklaces. The Israelites took most of their jewelry from others while at war. Gold and silver and gemstones are often listed among the booty taken during a raid. 2 Samuel 8:11 records the fact that David gained enormous amounts of gold and silver and bronze, King David, when he conquered the nations surrounding Israel. He dedicated all of it to the Lord, and his son Solomon used it to build the fabulous temple. So that, I think it was Solomon that built that temple in Jerusalem, and it was built according to God's instructions, and it's immaculate. Believe it or not, Solomon had so much gold in his kingdom that he made silver and gold as common in Jerusalem as stones. That's 2 Chronicles 1:15. The New Testament mentions jewelry specifically only once. Peter urges women to pay more attention to their inner beauty than their outward beauty. He wants them and us to remember that outer beauty fades away, but inner beauty grows more attractive each year. And that reminds me of, I think it's in Proverbs. It has this whole thing on how a woman should be, a woman of beauty should be. And it's all about the internal beauty that she'd have. Okay, our life and times. Tomorrow morning, when you put your rings on your finger, also put on a spirit of peace. And that's what we're doing. We are learning about building a strong foundation, meditating to find spirituality and our inner peace, right? To learning to love ourselves, learning to move forward in our lives, build our foundation, set goals, and to build ourselves professionally, personally, personal development, so that we can let our light shine for others, to guide others to find their soul and destiny, or move forward in whatever way. When you clasp your necklace around your neck, clasp a sweet spirit in your heart also. The jewelry you wear won't make much difference in your day, but the spirit you wear will. But the spirit you wear will in others' lives. Okay, so the rest is just kind of questions. So I'm not going to go through all that. But I did download, I'm going to go through a little bit of this. I have a couple articles over here as well. See if, okay, so the family connections. Rebekah is first mentioned in the genealogy of the descendants of Nahor, Abraham's brother. When the pilgrims set out from the Ur, the Chaldees, Nahor was one of the party and settled down at Canaan, where Terah, her father, died. Among Nahor's sons was Bethel, who, by an unknown wife, became the father of Rebekah, the sister of Laban. Rebekah married Isaac, the son of Abraham, by whom she had two sons, which was Esau and Jacob. The story of Isaac and Rebekah as a love lyric full of romance and tender beauty has been retold times without number, and is a charming record that never loses its appeal. Such an idyllic narrative is almost too familiar to need rehearsal and too simple to require comment, yet because it constitutes one of the most romantic scenes in the Bible. Its moving scenes, so fresh and artless in their old world simplicity, have a pertinent appeal of present-day society. Ancient Bible histories, with their arrestive characters and remarkable sequence of events and fortunes, never fail to leave an indelible imprint on our hearts. The chapter recording how a wife was found for Isaac presents a link in the chain of events leading up to that far-off divine event to which the whole creation moves. Through the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah, Abraham saw that day of Christ in which the church should become the bride of Christ. So remember, it all led up to the birth of Christ and how certain events transpired according to God. Almost 2 millenniums after the days of the patriots whom God spoke of as his friend, there were those who considered it a privilege to belong to the race having Abraham as its fountainhead. To be a son of Abraham or a lineal descendant of such a grand, great old divine was an honor. But Isaac enjoyed a still greater advantage, for Abraham was his own natural father. What a rich dowry of blessings must have been Isaac's because of such a close relationship. He had the inspiration of his father's godliness and the benefit of his prayers and wise counsels, even the matter of securing the right kind of wife. Abraham's opposition to idolatry is seen as his request that the partner for his son Isaac must not be of the daughters of Canaanites. And he had refused a grave for his wife Sarah amongst the sepulchres of the Hittites. So a wife of their son must not be sought among their daughters. So then again, Abraham sent him to his homeland to find a wife. Thus it came about that Abraham's trusted godly servant Eliezer was divinely guided to Haran, where Nahor, Abraham's brother, settled, too feebly to make the journey himself, because Abraham was older by then. Abraham gave his servant the most careful instructions and impressed upon him the solemn significance of his mission. Confident as to the result of the search of a suitable wife for Isaac, Abraham assured the earthly seeker that he would be guided by God's angel. Eleazar, the intelligent, prudent, obedient, and praying servant, went forth, seeking a sign of divine guidance, not to prove God's faithfulness, but for his own direction and the choice of a woman of character as a wife for his master's son. The servant came to Nahor's well at Nahor, and saw in Rebekah, who had come to draw the water, the answer to his prayer and the quest. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is where the caravan with the servant Eliezer and Rebekah set out for Abraham's home, and that's in the Canaanites. And now we come to a superb touch in the romantic story. Isaac was out in the field at eventide for his usual period of meditation. So it must have been evening and he was meditating. He saw the approaching camels and sensed the success of Eliezer in the choice of his wife. That still couldn't have been easy. I mean, you don't know who she is. Or reaching Isaac, Rebekah, according to the custom, veiled her face. And the end of this exquisite poem of the meeting of the bridegroom is seated in most expressive terms. Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Marrying sight unseen is a most dangerous venture, but in this case it was successful because the angel of the Lord had directed the events leading up to the union. When Rebekah saw the handsome, mild-mannered, and meditative Isaac, her heart went out to him. Must have been love at first sight. As for Isaac, a man of 40, so he was 40 years old by then, so, Abraham must have been 130 or 140 years old by then. And some 20 years older than Rebekah. Okay, so she was in her 20s. He instantly loved the most beautiful woman he beheld, and she remained his only love. Oh, that's sweet. Some matrimonial matches have been described as Lucifer matches because of the clash of temperament and temper, but the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah was certainly one made in heaven. See? That's what I'm saying. If we let God direct us and where we're supposed to go, look for the soulmate for you, it'll be the perfect one. Just you gotta wait on it. Gotta wait. There would be fewer broken homes if only young people looking for partners would seek the guidance of God, as the servant of Abraham did. We agree with Alexander Wyatt when he said of the ancient records of the circumstances leading to the securing of a wife for Isaac. A sweeter chapter was never written than the 24th of Genesis, the picture of aged Abraham swearing his most trusty servant about a bride for his son Isaac. That servant's journey to Padan Aram in the Far East, Rebekah first at the well and then in his mother's house, and then her first sight of her future husband. That long chapter is a perfect gem of ancient authorship. As with other pairs in the Bible, it is hardly possible to separate Isaac from Rebekah, whose lives were so closely knit together. That's sweet. Yet let us see if we can sketch a portrait of Rebekah herself. This is kind of fun. As a damsel, that is, maiden around 20 years of age, Rebekah was fair to look upon, meaning that she had an unaffected oriental beauty. She was a virgin and had a childlike simplicity. There was no trace of wantonness in her. As with her mother-in-law, Sarah's beauty carried its dangers. During her sojourn in Gerar, Isaac feared lest the physical charms of his wife might excite the desire of the king of Gerar, and so he lied. Thus Isaac passed Rebekah off as his sister, a course of action which might have had dire consequences. He fell into the same error as his father before him. Ooh, so he did the same thing that Abraham did. Ooh. Andrew Fuller says, the falls of those that have gone before us are like so many rocks on which others have been split. And the recording of them is like placing bayous over them for the security of future mariners. But the story of Isaac, the boy, served no beneficial purpose. Beautiful Rebekah had been taken by Abimelech, but one day as he looked out of the window, he saw Isaac caressing Rebekah, and he knew, okay, so the same thing. So it must have been this king that took Rebekah, but then saw Isaac caressing Rebekah, and he knew that he had been deceived. So here Isaac also, I don't know, I feel like it's cowardly, said Rebekah was his sister, and so the king was going to take her. Isaac's untruthfulness was discovered, and the heir of God's promise was rebuked by a heathen king for his lying and deception. In the province of God, Abimelech, an idolater, was made the protector of the child of promise. As an amicable and lovely girl, as her name suggests, she was industrious, for although she was a member of the family of standing, she was not afraid to spoil her hands. The hard work of drawing and carrying water, the provision she made for Eleazar's camel, and the meal she prepared speak of Rebekah as one who did not shun domestic duties. That she was a woman of faith is evident from what Paul says of her as being the recipient of a direct revelation from the Lord regarding universal blessings through her favorite Jacob. Rebekah's best qualities came out in the simple yet heartwarming narrative describing her response to Eleanor's approach and her service to him, and in her willingness to believe and act upon all he had told her. In his remarkable cameo of Rebekah, George Matheson uses the following terms of expression: a fine manner, remarkable tact, a sunbeam to her household, a very beautiful young woman with the gift of physical charm which was able to produce self-consciousness. The gift of intellectual simplicity, Rebekah's morning ray is a ray of simplistic light. Modest and meek, frank and open, readily kindness, great energy and faith, graciousness matching her physical charm, described Rebekah. When she became a mother, she revealed how masterful and clever she could be, a direct contrast to Isaac, who was probably more simple, slow of wit, and a mild of manner than his wife. The lines of Wordsworth can express Isaac's feelings when for the first time he gazed upon the lovely Rebekah and came to experience her comforting love as she filled the empty place in his heart because of his mother's death. She was a phantom of delight when first she gleamed upon my sight, a lovely apparition sent to be a moment's ornament. Her eyes as stars of twilight fair, like twilight's too her dusky hair, but all things else about her drawn from Maytime and the cheerful dawn, a dancing shape, an image gay, to haunt, to startle, and waylay. I saw her upon nearer view, a spirit, yet a woman too. Okay, so, oh goodness, this is long. So her children, motherhood came to Rebekah somewhat late in life when Isaac was an aging man. For 20 years, so they were childless for 20 years. They didn't have children. So Isaac was 60 then. And Rebekah was 40. And all of these things God had a hand in. For 20 years, she had been childless and conscious of God's promise that Abrahamic covenant could not be broken. Isaac entreated God that his long barren wife might conceive. He graciously answered his earnest intercession, and his wife was in line of God's purpose. It was sure of an answer. The years of waiting on the part of Isaac and Rebekah show that God has his own time for the fulfillment of his purpose. Like coral strands beneath the sea, so strongly built and chaste, the plans of God unfolding show no signs of human haste. In an age of almost universal polygamy, Isaac took no handmaid, concubine, or second wife, which says a lot about how much he loved Rebekah. Rebekah and he were bound together by the bonds of a mutual affection, and although childless, yet became the parents of two sons who were destined to be the progenitors of different nations. But when Rebekah became the mother of twins, the first of two Bible women mentioned as giving birth to twins, the other was Tamar. Somehow she changed and was a different character from the young bride who rode south so gaily to meet her lover in Canaan, as our next glimpse of her will show. The opposite characters of Rebekah's twins, Esau and Jacob, brought into sharp focus the dark side of their mother. That's interesting, isn't it? As Esau was the first to emerge from her womb, he had the precedence and was thus the heir to the two things, namely, the sovereignty and the priesthood of the clan. The birthright and the blessings. The birthright was a right of succession. The blessing was something to be given during the lifetime of the father. We learn that as the boys grew, Esau was a cunning, skillful hunter. This is really interesting. I've always found this part of the story very interesting. Esau was a cunning, skillful hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man, dwelling in tents. These are the two sons of Rebekah and Isaac. At the time of their birth, Jacob seized his brother's heel. And this is also pretty interesting. Remember, they're being born. So at time of their birth, Jacob grabbed his brother's heel, an incident prophetic of the day when he would supplant Esau. Often in children, there are characteristics predicative of the manner of the adults they will be. Now, isn't that interesting? The divergence of Rebekah's twins in temperament, inclination, occupation, and religious aberrations is most apparent. Esau was wrapped in a raiment of hair, a rough man of the wilderness, a clever hunter with something of the wild, daring spirit of the modern. Bedouin. Jacob was the opposite of his brother. He preferred a fixed abode, to dwell in his tent rather than to roam the desert. Esau was probably more brilliant, attractive, forceful, daring than his twin brother. Jacob, in spite of his weaknesses and mistakes, was the finer character, and on the whole truer to the Lord and more fitted to possess the blessings of the birthright. Further, there was a difference of regard on the part of Isaac and Rebekah's toward their sons that resulted in sorrow and separation. So Rebekah and Isaac favored the sons differently. Isaac loved Esau, but the love was somewhat sensual. He loved his son because he did eat of his venison. So Esau was the hunter, and Isaac liked that about him. Such love is of a carnal nature, for love in its highest sense has regard not so much to what the loved one gives us, to what he or she is. So he must have loved his character. Rebekah loved Jacob, not because he was more of a homebody than his brother or possessed a more loving nature than he, but because Jacob was the Lord's preference. Esau thought so lightly of the birth. Yeah, that's right. So Esau didn't want to have the birthright. And he thought so lightly of the birthright that he's willing to sell it for a mess of pottage and be guilty thereby of the sin and profanity. Jacob, however, recognized the solemnity of the birthright and wished to possess it. So Esau didn't want it. Jacob did want it. Esau was the hunter. Jacob was the one that laid around in the tents, had a more calm nature. Jacob, however, recognized, so he wanted the birthright. Esau thought of it as no more value than a mouthful of food. But Jacob knew something of the sacred significance of the birthright and was therefore a more fit channel through which the blessings of God could flow to the seed of Abraham. As Rebekah is often blamed for the partiality or favoritism she manifested for Jacob, it may be profitable to consider the matter of preference in family life. When parents single out one of their children as a favorite and shower more love and attention upon that one than the rest, such an unwise and unnatural course inevitably results in jealousy and strife. I know. That reminds me of Moses and how his brothers hated him because he was favored, and they sold him into slavery because of it. I don't know how anyone could do that to their kids, or how could you love one more than the other? I don't get that. Although Isaac found in Esau that strong, practical nature and energetic character which distinguished the women he so dearly loved, and Rebekah saw in the gentle Jacob a replica of the father had so strangely attracted her that first day when she met him meditating in the fields at evening. So it sounds like Rebekah thought that Jacob reminded her more of Isaac. It sounds like. The partiality was absolutely indefensible and led to lying and deception on Rebekah's part. She still shouldn't have showed it that way. What else can be expected but confusion and trouble when there is a crossing of purposes between parents concerning their children? Was the root cause of Rebekah's unnatural and unmotherly preference of Jacob over Esau, and her treatment of Esau as though he was not the lack of deep love for her husband? Was the root cause of Rebekah's unnatural and unmotherly preference of Jacob over Esau, and her treatment of Esau as though he was not the lack of deep love for her husband, and the union of moral and spiritual ideas and ideals characteristic of every true marriage? We are certainly told that Isaac loved Rebekah, but not that she loved Isaac. Somehow we feel that if husband and wife had been one in all things in that ancient home, Rebekah would have been more concerned about Jacob's character than his prosperity. But Isaac was partial to Esau and Rebekah partial to Jacob, which favoritism results in Esau leaving home and Jacob fleeing from it. Rebekah's record therefore shows that while Isaac was faithful to her, she was unfaithful to Isaac in a twofold way. First, she cheated Esau, her oldest son, and Isaac's pet, out of his birthright. Then she cheated Esau out of his father's blessing, which prerogative had the effect of testimonial bequest. Comparing the chapter of the romantic meeting of Isaac and Rebekah and with his perfection of writing in the darkest chapter of Rebekah's deception, Alexander White says that the ship was launched on such a golden morning only the more darkens the surrounding gloom when she goes to the bottom. Then dwelling with the secret alienation that developed between Isaac and Rebekah, the same renowned expositor adds. When the two twin brothers were brought up day after day and hour after hour in an atmosphere of favoritism and partiality, and indulgence and injustice, no father, no mother can surely need to have it pointed out to them what present misery and what future wages of such sin, and all to be seen and to be expected in that evil house. Oh, yeah, okay, so one result of Rebekah's preference for Jacob was the spite and the sight of Esau going out and grieving his parents by marrying two ungodly women. Esau was 40 years old when he did this, and the same age at which Isaac married Rebekah. His parents must have seen in the foreign wives he brought home the fistfuls of the devil's garden they had sowed for themselves. So remember, this bloodline, they had to keep it pure and couldn't marry Canaanites. And so Esau decided out of rebellion to go marry two of them. Their great grief would seem to have been almost the only thing that two old people were at one about by that time. Esau had seen little in his mother to admire and respect. Therefore, he was never in any mood to please her. What a different story would have been written if Esau's home had been without partiality. Oh, I agree with that. Totally agree with that. You don't favor. So, I don't know. This is pretty long. You go on. What basically happens is when Isaac is getting ready to pass away, I believe he couldn't. This is a loose interpretation, my remembrance of it. I believe he was close to being blinded or something, and he asked for his son. He's not Jacob, Esau. Is it Esau? Oh, I can't. Okay. Yeah, Esau, to have him come to him so he could give him his blessing, because the oldest son gets the blessing. And so what happened is Rebekah told Jacob about it, told him the way to go out and hunt and take food to Isaac, so he thought it was Esau, and so he was deceived. So Isaac, not understanding that, because he thought it was Esau because he had brought his food and he smelled like him, the wild. He blessed Jacob instead of Esau. Although, Esau, to me, didn't want it. So, but it's still a deception, right? Yeah, so they were all okay. So this is pretty good. Samuel Morley once said, "I am much what my mother has made me. It was so in a wrong sense in the life of Jacob. For as in the case of Athaliah, his mother was his counselor to do wickedly. The thoroughness with which Jacob carried out his mother's plan of deception is surely one of the worst features of the narrative. Fearful of the failure of his mother's plot, Jacob said, "I will bring a curse upon me and not a blessing." But Rebekah replied, "Upon me, by thy curse, my son, can only obey my voice." The future of scheming life of Jacob, however, was but the extension of the deceitful qualities of his mother. And both suffered as a result of adopting false methods to accomplish right ends. So instead of trusting and letting it unfold like God had wanted, Rebekah got her son to trick Isaac as he was dying. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to skip down to almost the last picture we have of Rebekah is when she tearfully witnessed the hasty departure of her favorite son. A strong-minded, decisive girl had grown into an autocratic matriarch and ends her days as a broken-hearted woman. So when she died, we are not told. Isaac, although much older than Rebekah, was still living. Oh, okay. When Rebekah returned to Canaan over 20 years later. Hold on. When she died, we are not told. Isaac, although much older than Rebekah, 20 years older, was still living when Jacob returned to Canaan over 20 years later. So Jacob left. It is assumed that she died during Jacob's long absence and was buried in a cave of Machpelah near Hebron. A fitting pentive for her grave would have been, "Died of a broken heart." The only moment Rebekah has is to be found in the Anglican marriage service of the Book of Common Prayer, where we read that as Isaac and Rebekah lived faithfully together, so these persons may surely perform and keep the vow and covenant betwixt them. While she may have been faithful during the first 20 years of marriage while she was childless, Rebekah, by her unjustifiable, treacherous, and wholly inexplicable intervention for her favorite son, stained her solemn marriage. Reviewing Rebekah's life and character, well, I would assume that God was upset with her too, because that's not what he had planned. Reviewing Rebekah's life and character, what are some of the warnings to heed? Are we not forcibly reminded that love which seeks success at the cost of truth and righteousness is of earthly? The devil maximum is, nothing succeeds like success. But from God's standpoint, nothing succeeds which does not follow the way of truth of honesty. Then while she had physical beauty, her denomination of Jacob and her scheme to deceive her husband revealed the lack of the beauty of a godly character. Further, Rebekah is a warning to all parents that there should be no favorites in the family, that all alike should be dear to them. If there is partiality for any in a family, it should only be of those who are weak and helpless. Another warning bell is that when a wife conspires against her husband, or vice versa, they are guilty of a baseness which language cannot describe. When one partner finds that he has been betrayed by the other, the world becomes a blank. The mind has 1,000 eyes, the heart but one. But the light of a whole life dies when love is done. There is one beneficial application we can make of Rebekah's prompt decision to follow Eliezer to meet her future bridegroom, Isaac, and I will go. In connection with the higher betrothal of the soul and the heavenly bridegroom, he comes to the center saying as Esler did to Rebekah, "Will you go with me? Will you follow me into that country where saints immortal reign?" When hearts respond to such an appeal, "Yea, Lord, I will go, I will follow thee, whithersoever thou goest," they are twice blessed. Well, that's quite the story. Dang it. I wish Rebekah would have, I don't know what happened. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? That's why we got to work on building a strong foundation every day. That's why we have to educate ourselves and not do what Rebekah did. I don't know what happened. That's interesting. Okay, well, that's it for today, and that's it for this week. We made it through another week. Okay, so our next one on Monday, we start with Rachel. And her name means ooh. So, okay, that was another interesting read for today. Very interesting indeed. Rebekah. That was a lot I'm learning a lot though. I'm learning a lot. And what I find also interesting in this story is that we're following the lineage of Christ. So I'm pretty sure we are going to get down to Mary's, probably both Marys. I'm sure. Yeah. We've got a lot. This is very interesting, but we do, I'm sure, yeah, Mary, the mother of Jesus. And then there's another Mary, Mary of Bethany. Very interesting. Okay, so Rachel is on Monday. So, okay, much blessings to all of you. Thanks for joining me again. Subscribe and like and spread the word and share the message. This is, today is April 23rd. I'm pretty sure. It's going really, really fast. Keep your eyes on me, not only for direction, but also for empowerment. I never lead you to do something without equipping you for the task. That is why it's so important to seek my will in everything you do. There are many burned out Christians who think more is always better, who deem it unspiritual to say no. In order to know my will, you must spend time with me, enjoying my presence. I will show you the path of life, and my presence is fullness of joy. At my right hand there are pleasures forevermore. Psalms 141:8, Psalms 16:11. So, goodness, this has been a pretty educational week. We got to learn about Eve. So Eve, Sarah, and here we're still on Sarah. Eve and Sarah and Hagar, Sarah's handmaid, and then Lot's wife, who we don't know her name, Mrs. Lot, and today was Rachel. So it's leading us down this path, carrying us forward, that all these women are involved with the lineage of Christ, I believe. So it seems like that's where we're going. It's very interesting. I'm liking it a lot. I hope you are. Give me comments. Let me know what you think. Have a very blessed day. Love your family and friends. Love them. Have a super weekend. And I will be talking to you this weekend, giving you an update on my house remodel. Ciao, mate, my Tomodachi's.